Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. I'm your host, Laura. I'm a licensed master social worker here in New York. Today, we have a wonderful guest, Andrea Rodriguez, who will be diving into transitioning from a nonprofit to business, some social work issues related to working with the Latinx population, immigrants. Thank you so much, Andrea, for coming on today.
Of course, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm really excited. As we dive in, do you want to just kind of introduce yourself to the listeners, what you're currently doing, and kind of your background?
Sure. So I'm a licensed mental health counselor practicing in upstate New York. I was originally born in Honduras, but immigrated to New York and raised in the Bronx. I went to undergrad and grad school in the city. Moved to upstate New York in the pandemic, but currently own my own practice in Troy, New York, and I'm working to grow into a group practice at this point. And I practice in English and Spanish, and my focuses are trauma, complex PTSD, BPD, abuse, and depression.
Okay. Some solid things to do. That's awesome. Okay. Well, that's exciting. Now, have you been kind of in the nonprofit world before you started your own practice?
Yeah, this is like the first, I guess, not nonprofit role that I've had. Started in the nonprofit world not even fresh out of undergrad. I started as a respite worker for foster youth at like 18.
Yeah.
And did that kind of all throughout college. Had a lot of work at like medical clinics and then being kind of like a social work support system for patients.
Mm-hmm.
I did some back to work, post-incarceration work in the city. What else? It's mostly case management for like at-risk youth as well, and some foster care under my belt as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. You've done it all.
Sort of. I just kind of, like I kind of could get into a little bit more later, like love the mission,
mm-hmm.
but sometimes, in the nonprofit world, there's like sometimes an unhealthy amount of bureaucracy or like toxic work environment, that I kind of had no patience for. So even though I love the mission, sometimes I would leave a job after a year, just because I can't martyr myself for the system, no matter how much we love our patients and our clients.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of why I had like a smattering of roles.
Yeah, I really relate to that too, because I've talked about this before, but like I started off right out of grad school. I was in community mental health. And again, like loved the mission. The nonprofit I worked for, they did so much for the community. They had like 1 million programs. They were doing it. But the way that workers were treated was insane. Like I didn't have insurance. Like,
oh my God,
wasn't good. And I mean, my caseload was at capacity. And I told them that over and over and over again. And I was working still like 60 plus hours a week. And they would still ask me, can you just take on one more? Just take on one. I'm like, I'm dying over here.
Yeah. And they kind of dangle the hardships of the clients, as if, again, like martyring ourselves, right? So like, I think sometimes in that environment, the clients are like, not even the hard part. It's like dealing with the bureaucracy and the really unhealthy expectations and kind of viewing workers as like disposable, right? Like we won't pay you more at all. We won't pay you for all the degrees that you have. I don't care that it's Christmas. But also kind of like, well, if you won't do it, we'll find someone else who will. Kind of environments kind of on top of, kind of like systematic racism, sexual harassment, sexism within a field that you would think that this is quote unquote the field that it's not going to happen in. And you're really wrong. So yeah, that's kind of what pushed me a little bit into private practice. What I will say is that my last role, so post-grad school, which is the role that, nonprofit, community mental health in the Bronx, preferred population, loved my patients, loved the range of diagnoses that I would see as well. That was the best nonprofit I've ever worked for. Super ethical, paid appropriately.
Amazing.
Of great benefits. But it was just not sustainable. I had
Yeah.
65 therapy sessions every week.
No. No.
Yeah, exactly. And I learned a lot, but yeah. And then it's also kind of like if you want to have a family, it would be like you could have a family and then New York State has the paid maternity and paternity leave, so they wouldn't really have a problem with that. You just like have your child and kind of leave for 3 months. But when you would come back, your caseload would be zero and it was fee for service.
Yeah.
So you're getting paid nothing until you build up your caseload, which might take like 4 months again. So that's not sustainable for anyone's families. So in the organization, the only people who had families were management.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they were great for promotions, and I was offered one. But within that structure, management has no caseload. You don't see any patients. It's pure paperwork and management. And I didn't want to lose that element of work.
There must be a middle ground where you can enjoy your life and still like have the work that you want to do.
Exactly. Yeah. But that was like top notch.
Great. At what point, like, when did you get to a point where you're like, we got to leave the nonprofit? Like, let's go kind of into the business sector.
Kind of, when my husband and I kind of moved upstate about our house, it's kind of like, I've cut my teeth. I've proven myself enough. Like, I don't need to be seeing 65 patients in 1 week.
Yeah.
It's unsustainable, you know, and it was a tough population that was in a lot of crises as well. It's not, let me just leave, close my laptop and no one's going to hit me up later. That's not the case, you know, and also a lot of collaboration. It wasn't just the sessions. It was collaborating with case managers, providing documentation, sometimes providing proof for like maybe foster care or like, you know, it's a lot of extra stuff that came with the caseload.
That's very true. Like my own caseload was very high, but you're right. Like it was all that extra stuff where I'm like, I had to go through like this whole, it's like 100 pages to go through, like just dealing with people in court, like just everything. And I'm like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah. They had a great policy that like, we would not cooperate unless there's a subpoena. And then if you got a subpoena, they had their lawyers. So you're like really never going to collaborate with anyone. But that would be its own thing, explaining to people. They're like, oh, why won't you come to court? Oh, why won't you provide me a letter? The only thing that we would provide is like attendance.
Yeah.
And like a simple printout. But then also working with heavy documentation of Medicaid was its own part of it. Well.
Yeah. I know that was one of the things I had to learn once I left that job, and because I'm at a private practice right now. And I remember first looking at this job and being like, this must be a joke. There's no way that this job
this is all I have to do. This is all I have to do.
Yeah. And like even my own supervisor, he had to tell me like within my first couple weeks of working there, he was like, Laura, your notes are way too long. Like you can cut it out. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Right. Exactly. What if they audit us like they always do? Right. You never get audited. But yeah, that was a big part of it. Like I want to have a life again.
Yeah. What did that kind of transition look like for you? What did you needed to do to prepare for that?
So thankfully I was able to be completely virtual, because of the pandemic. It was kind of forced on us from like one day to the other, especially in the city. It was like one day we're going in person and then like March 13th, completely relearn how to do your job. Right. At that point, like I said, this company is NYPCC in the Bronx, and they have locations. If anyone's listening, trying to get employment in the city as a therapist, they are a great organization to work with, especially in the beginning of your career.
Okay.
They said, we are having a huge demand for virtual. So people who are fully virtual, if you move to Connecticut, cool, you can stay virtual. Just keep your license up to date. So I could have stayed in that role for years and it wouldn't have mattered, and still been up for promotions, even if I was completely virtual.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, they're great. So that transition was more like, okay, I have to keep my 65 people and work myself into the ground for maybe 6 months to start building up this caseload. That way I can slowly decrease to 65 and make room for this. So I kind of was like, what do I want my private practice schedule to look like? I wanted a 4-day work week. I wanted it to be completely virtual at that time, cause it was 2021. And I was like, hey, can I go down to 60? And they were like, oh, that's fine. Because during the pandemic, our minimum was 55 before the pandemic, our minimum was 55 patients. And then they were like, do you want more people? And I was like, I'm not doing anything. My city is dying around me. Let me take on 10 more people because I want to feel like I'm doing something.
Sure, yeah.
Just home doing nothing and crying over the daily PowerPoint presentations about how many people are passing away.
Right.
It was an awful time. So took on more people and then I decreased it to 55. Slowly by like people naturally terminating.
Right.
And then I filled up those slots. And then when I was like, okay, this is a little bit of money, so I won't feel this difference. And then I decreased it to 45. And then I filled up those people. So I was working like 70, 80-hour weeks to like make this transition and not feel it financially. So it was horrendous, this transition. Yeah. And then, building up the bravery to be like, okay, now I'm part-time because I have these days filled. And when I fill up that, I'll decrease another day and another day until I'm fully done. So that transition took from like maybe November 22 to like the May that came. So it's been a grueling 6 months.
Yeah.
It was completely worth it at that point because now Monday through Thursday, that's worked. I had a max caseload of 28 people.
Amazing.
Right? Yeah. And it was fully virtual. And then I saved up money. And then in the new year after that, I went in person. So now I'm home, working from home one day, which is Mondays, and then in-person sessions, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, have Fridays off. So the goal. Wow. It was a long time coming, but yeah.
That's so amazing. Oh, I love that. Was that longer transition mostly like for financial reasons, just to kind of buffer that?
Oh yeah, it's purely financial reasons, cause we got to eat, but also kind of, I think there's a lot of pressure with I'm going to completely quit my job. Yeah. And any hiccup can be, at least for me, would have felt very like psyche damaging. Cause like throughout this whole time, there's a lot of self-doubt, at least for me, a lot of self-doubt. Like I cried all the time about, should I go part-time? My husband was with me and like run the numbers like 5 times. And he's like, the math is mathing. Go ahead. Like you're fine. But it's just kind of biting the bullet to like do it and building up the confidence in yourself that every single step you take is going to work out because it's worked out so far.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. What an exciting time. And look where you are now. Oh,
you're sweet. Yeah. And now at this point, I have an extensive wait list. I feel like I'm not serving the community, so that's kind of pushing me to open up as a group practice, especially having the space to do it. Cause I feel like it's just such an underserved bubble of like upstate New York, I think.
Definitely. Was that your intention in wanting to start your own practice, is it would eventually become a group practice?
It was like a pipe dream, but I would have been content if it was just giving me the freedom to be on my own.
Yeah. That's so interesting because I really, very similarly, have only been starting a practice like since I started my own family, where I'm just like, I can't be doing this other kind of job, like with as little flexibility, like with all my evenings eaten up, like, well, when do I have a life to spend with my own family?
Exactly. Yeah. I was kind of trying to be proactive, not there yet, but trying to be proactive of like creating my own life in that way. And also giving myself time to like do other interests, right? So like, I teach a few classes at like Maria College up here. And I mean, we all know like the articles about adjunct professors. They don't pay us really well, but it's purely, it's not worth the amount of effort if you're talking like financially, but it's like purely like a pet interest.
Right.
like wanting to get in the classroom, connecting with like future psychology students.
Mm-hmm.
That is like a passion. And I would never be able to do that in another role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that. What were some,
Yeah.
so I mean, there's some self-doubt that came up too during that process. What were some of those other like big challenges you really had to work through during that transition?
Yeah. Pertaining to the self-doubt, I think it's, part of it was probably cultural.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like coming from an immigrant background, we're
Mm-hmm.
really taught to like put your head down, put in hard work, and you'll reap the benefits, which
Sure.
is true. But that also kind of makes us a risk averse
Mm-hmm.
population sometimes of like, hey, this is good. Don't ask
Mm-hmm.
for more. This is good.
Mm-hmm.
Don't mess up a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is true because my job was great. It was super flexible considering the field, compensating more than appropriately. So why mess it up, right? Kind of like
Mm-hmm.
that. Don't ask for too much. Don't
Right.
dream too hard kind of thing.
It's good right now. We're safe. We're secure.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, especially like kind of growing up in poverty and being on
Mm.
survival mode or seeing my parents struggle. Now they're doing amazingly for themselves, but it did take a long time. So that kind
Yeah.
of creates this like apprehension to
Mm-hmm.
change. On top of like it being the pandemic, we're told that we're in a recession all the time,
Yeah.
buying a house, and that feels way more scary than paying rent.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Now, as you were building kind of your caseload for your practice, what did that look like? Where did you even start? Because you also, did you move during that time or you had already moved?
I had already moved.
Okay.
I'd already moved, but we hadn't been in the house for more than like 5, 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
really. So that was one thing, but I had been researching for years how I was going to do the business.
Mm.
It might sound weird, but I enjoy like the monotony of operations.
Sure.
So, so like I enjoyed finding a billing platform
Mm.
and like finding what I was going to use for note taking and how I was going to do notes. Like I had that figured out years ago.
Mm.
What liability insurance costs, what companies, like the boring things.
Yeah.
Enjoyed kind of collecting that, kind of roadmap. So I thought of that for a long time and then I was kind of just throwing it in motion
Mm-hmm.
once I got my license. And marketing, really worked hard on my copy, really
Mm-hmm.
worked hard on my website, on SEO, which was really tough because that's like not my background at all.
Yeah. A lot of
And then
research that goes into
it was,
figuring that stuff out.
yeah, it took like years to research
Mm-hmm.
that, on the back end. But then kind of when I was licensed, I was like, great, now I have all this ready to go. That
Mm-hmm.
isn't to say that it takes years though. If you kind of like bunker down for some time and like
Mm-hmm.
break down what you need to do, it's definitely something that's possible in like a few months as well.
Sure.
And then marketing everywhere and also saving up probably a few $100s on like your paperwork, your legal stuff, registering with your county as a business because you don't want to get in trouble with any of those things later on.
Mm-hmm.
Or you don't want to do your taxes at the back end and figure out you didn't save anything.
Right.
Owe thousands of dollars. Getting an accountant was a big thing.
Mm.
So doing all those things in the beginning, and then that way, once your clients come in, you look professional. You look like
Mm.
someone that someone wants to invest money in. You know, you're not scrambling to like take people's insurance. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really instill trust. You want to make it look like you have it 100% together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people trust you.
Mm-hmm. That's very true because it's still a business. You're providing a service, and that kind of trust and rapport does start from those even like businessy administrative moments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah.
What would be reasons for staying in a nonprofit versus going into practice?
I completely understand why people want to.
Mm-hmm.
Stability,
Yeah.
knowing what your paycheck's going to be. I think that's something that's tough to get used to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for my employees, it would be different, but like, but for myself, if I want to go on vacation, I can,
Mm-hmm.
but where's the money that I saved up to a lot for this
Yeah.
thing? It's Martin Luther King Day. Great. I took it off. Okay. But where's the money for that I
Mm-hmm.
should have saved up for it? it's like a lot of things that you don't think about, until you're there. I envisioned it as work-life balance, but it's not. I'm constantly thinking about marketing, constantly looking at emails. It's not something you can just, I'll get to it on Monday, like you would at like even a nonprofit job.
Yeah.
Right. Even the ones that are like the most grueling, you can step back a little bit. But if I don't do certain things, a lot of things don't get done, right? I'm in charge of cleaning my office, right? Like you probably have to think about mopping your office. But like I have to do that. I have like little throw pillows. I have to take them home and wash them. I have to worry about Instagram. I have to worry about who's checking the console, me, right? Yeah. Is my voicemail up to date and whatever, just like nitty gritty things that come with running a business. So while it's more freedom, sometimes it kind of isn't. It's like a different kind of freedom.
That's very true. It does make me think, like, I remember going to the office when I worked in person and I'm like, oh, there's no coffee here. I'm like, like really is that little stuff that's always kind of worrying in the back of your mind to keep track of.
Exactly. Yeah. Like one time a patient came and she was like, oh, I'm thirsty. Do you have anything? And I was like, damn, I don't. And now I gotta like buy water just in case.
Yeah.
Somebody wants a little baby water, right? And ever since that day, nobody asked me for water. But
of course.
Yeah, of course not. Right. But yeah, kind of like who's gonna do it? Oh, it's you that's gonna do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of fun stuff. I mean, that's business, you know, like when it's your own business, you're also gonna take care of those details in that way.
You're more invested in it, yeah. But I completely understand back to your question about who would want to stay in a nonprofit. If you don't want to do those things, don't do them.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot. And also, it might just not be something that you enjoy.
Yeah. That's very true. Yeah. Now, I mean, it sounds like you're pretty successful. You know, like you did a lot of work.
Really
sweet. In a spot where. Like it's really exciting. What were some of the most important things that you've had to keep in mind to like have a successful practice in that way?
Kind of staying constantly like trying to take a temperature of like what my population is. So like in Troy, if you don't know Troy, it's like Albany adjacent. Yeah. It's like crossing the river, right? From Albany. Very college town. About a quarter of my patients are Gen Z. I see some couples here and there. I think I'm the only Spanish speaking provider in the whole area, really.
Wow.
So it's also keeping that in mind. And what are kind of the issues that are current with the population that you're going to see, as opposed to being in a nonprofit, we're kind of assigned to people that are based on your specialty or not, right? So trying to keep up with what this population is struggling with individually. Troy is also kind of like a very LGBTQ friendly space and friendly region. So keeping up with LGBTQ issues, keeping up with issues that are impacting these populations as a whole in the country, right? So any legislation that has anything to do with LGBT community, I try to keep well versed in, because someone is going to be impacted. Someone's going to have emotions about these things. It's relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's very true. Which makes sense. Like if you're in a certain location, you want to stay in tune with what's going on.
Yeah.
I remember when I was working in New York, I too now live upstate. I'm in the Binghamton area though.
Cute.
Yeah.
No, we're kind of far, but New York is too big.
But I remember there was something going on in New York. I can't remember. It was something concerning. And I had a client come in and I was like, Laura, do you know what's going on? And I was like so out of the loop.
Yes.
So then it just created this whole explanation. And then that takes away from their time to process because they're busy explaining what's going on.
Yeah. No, I try to read like the local news blurb. I try to read the New York Times. I try to like watch the TikToks that my 19-year-old girlies are watching. What are they? They talk about, I don't know, I have a handful of patients that were really into tarot cards and like crystals. Yeah. And I was like, I can't look dumb here. And then I like researched all about these things. So I like don't make them feel like I don't get what they're talking about.
Yeah. Very true. I really get all my movie recommendations from clients because they like will say something and I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about.
I have to watch them too. Yeah. Be relevant.
Okay. Yeah. Now, this is something that's come up for me, at least in thinking about going into private practice. Now I work at a practice, is just kind of the social work values aspect of it, because I think I did feel slightly more in tune with like social justice work, social work values when I was in a nonprofit. And I felt like we kind of dealt with those things more directly. I'm wondering, you're not a social worker technically, but like what kind of those values that you hold in your profession inform your business practices, so we feel like we're still doing that good work, but you're also taking care of yourself?
Yeah. So I think it's a balance. Even though I'm not a social worker, a lot of my career was working hand in hand with social workers. And even though I'm in private practice, I still collaborate with certain patients with their exterior team. But always trying to take like an anti-racist practice and multicultural perspective. I treat every patient, as their own person, in the sense of like, just because someone is Latina living in New York City doesn't mean that another Latina living in New York City struggling with the same diagnosis has anything to do with this person.
Right.
Like it's nothing is a monolith. They're the experts in their own life, but also taking like a decolonizing therapeutic approach to therapy, just because, especially with minority populations, so much of therapy sometimes contradicts our overarching culture. What I mean by that is like, and this is a major generalization, but for the most part, the Latino population, especially the older generations, are a very close-knit, collectivist, family-oriented, conservative group of people. So certain things like you should just have boundaries with your mom is probably just going to alienate your patient and make them feel like you don't get it or you don't understand my family, even if you're completely right. But there's ways to like vocalize this and motivate patients to enact culturally appropriate boundaries with their families, or maybe they're just not going to, and that's their thing. That's perfectly okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of ties back to just knowing who you're working with, you know, like being just really familiar and in tune with the people that you're supporting.
Yeah, like read your room. But also back to how do I also think it's equitable care has to be important. For me, I always wanted to take insurance. That was something that was super, super important for me.
Yeah.
Because if I can't even afford what I'm providing, then what am I doing? Right. That isn't right. And that isn't to like slam people who don't. I completely understand the reasons why people don't. Insurance is a headache. But that's why I took a lot of research into finding billing platforms that were going to guarantee me a decent rate, a good rate, reimburse appropriately, not give me back and forth about claims. And that took a lot of work to get, but you know, here we are. But also trying to find people with out of network benefits and finding a billing platform that doesn't make that a nightmare. And I have like a handful of sliding scale spots for people as well. So that to me was about making it equitable and accessible.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, that's so important too, because like you said, like I get why people do completely like private pay, self-pay, do what you gotta do. But for me to like scratch my own itch of just being like, I want to make sure that this is covered. It just feels good. Yeah,
exactly. It's the relief that people get. Like sometimes you'll have like, oh, I can't afford it. And I'd be willing to pay for it. But I was like, let's run this. Right. And about a quarter of my patients are private pay just because of different reasons. Right. But a good portion are insurance patients.
Yeah. That's so important. I really do like that point that you said though, like, if you can't afford it yourself, what are you doing?
What am I doing? Right. Like, I understand businesses that are selling a luxury, but I don't think therapy should be a luxury. unless you're super niche. And, I do know clinicians who charge 250, 300 an hour. More power to you. But that's just not something I wanted to do.
Yeah. I'm also wondering with those kind of rates too, like what are you bringing to the table where you're charging that much? Like, are you really doing your due diligence to make sure that you're a skilled, competent person that's almost like worthy of charging that much for a session?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think that, I have a colleague in the city who does also let's talk about location, right? Like I can't talk about like my puny rent here for my office space in comparison to like friends in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Right. But I have like a colleague that does like EMDR and it's super short term and she has excellent results and her patients are in there for like 3 months.
Yeah.
Call off, right? Like, yeah, go nuts. You're showing results. So yeah. And also maybe like, couples, I think is really draining.
Oh yeah.
And for the clinician and tough work. So I kind of get that. So higher rate for those things.
I mean, double the people in the room, so.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to make sure that we have space to also just talk about the people that you work with and support like, within the Latinx population. First, what's been your experience? What kind of things do you can dive into with your clients?
In terms of like diagnoses, struggles?
Yeah, both.
Yeah. I think I have a lot of patients who are more young urban professionals or just young adults transitioning from family, because I only see adults, I don't see teens or children, transitioning from sometimes an enmeshed family system to like trying to lead an independent life. So that's usually stuff that I see. A lot of, like I said, complex PTSD, some difficulty with transitioning to American life from back home, wherever back home is, and how incredibly different it is. Homesickness, isolation, not feeling like they belong in this country, even though they've been here 10, 20, 30 plus years. I think that upstate New York sometimes adds an extra barrier for people because if you're in like New York City, for example, you could live and breathe within your Latino community, never learn a lick of English, doesn't really negatively impact your life.
Right.
That is not the case here. It's a bit of a starker difference. Also, like I said, poverty, food insecurity, worrying about kind of getting caught if you are undocumented. So I think it's like the social work, mental health community, we could work on providing people with those basic things that some of us kind of take for granted, like documentation, like maybe English learning lessons, help with resumes, tutoring and FAFSA help and college application help for their children, financial literacy, these systems that they're just not familiar with to be helpful for our people here.
Absolutely. Really addressing like those systemic barriers that are there that really make it difficult for people to live a comfortable, peaceful life.
Yeah, it's like I can't heal from being in a burning building or what feels like a burning building for a long time.
Absolutely. Which is exactly like that anti-oppressive lens that you're talking about too and what I've been seeing too just a lot on Instagram, like learning more about the anti-oppressive lens and how, I mean, like therapy now, where we are in America is very westernized. And so also like, getting away from that idea to also be like, there's more than one way to do therapy. There's more than one way to heal and to get support.
Yeah. And like you're saying, like a super Western way of looking at things. So like, I mean, to be frank, grad school for me was sometimes some of the most racist experiences I ever had.
Yeah.
From, I mean, and the viewers can't see me, but I'm like basically a white Latina, right? That's not a great representation of color, but my school was so white. And when any color was discussed, Asian, Arab, any Black, any POC was discussed, I was kind of tapped into, what do you think? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not these populations of people. I cannot speak for these people. But a lot of like decolonizing work had to happen in school. A lot of like white ignorance was kind of had to be deconstructed in school, and then sometimes being painted as an aggressive, feisty Latina. And he was like, "What are we? What are we talking here? You can't ask me what I think," and then take it in such a negative, defensive way. And then, and thankfully, like our school went to Fordham. Our school was combative in teaching us. So our professor would be like, "I noticed you made a face. Do you have something to say?" Very confrontational, which I think is great, because then it kind of it like takes the fear out of confronting a patient in an appropriate way.
Yeah.
Because they would make us do it to each other. Very Socratic method there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, your own experience too in grad school, to me, really shows the importance of having clinicians and therapists that look like you in the room. Because if we're dealing with just only white women all the time, like there's going to be treatment like that and microaggressions and just straight up, like in your face, like racism and discrimination that's happening in the therapy room. And that is not cool.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Or kind of like, jumping the gun of calling ACS, or jumping the gun of seeing certain things as abusive. And I'm not talking about like hitting your kids. I'm talking about like how we speak to our children is different. How we raise our children is different. Sometimes it's more assertive, but that doesn't mean it's wrong, right? But if you're not kind of exposed to different things, then we can't really delineate.
Absolutely. Same thing with like diagnoses. This is something I've been trying to be a lot more mindful of too, is like, especially right now with just where we are in the world, how so much of like mental health right now is just normal reaction to the state of the world. And it's like, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, it sucks. It'd be weird if you were functioning all cylinders blazing. It'd be weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, let's see. What, I guess in your role, with the different challenges that like the people that you work with, like the Latinx population you work with, the immigrant population you work with, what are ways that you support them? I guess like even outside of therapy, right? Because you can provide counseling, but what else do you see is really powerful in supporting what they need?
I refer a lot to like local organizations that help migrants, that help people who are undocumented. The Albany, Detroit area has like great food pantries, free, like the free food refrigerators. I know that there's a better way to say that. I'm just blanking on it, but there's a decent amount of resources here. The local Planned Parenthood is great for things that aren't just reproductive health. Yeah, kind of like knowing your local resources and getting help there, sending people there. I'm building a little file of where we can send people. And also, even when someone reaches out for a consult and maybe I'm not appropriate for them, maybe I don't have a slot available, maybe I don't take their insurance and they can't make it, and all my citing skills is full. Always having someone to refer people out. And also doing the scary thing of like reaching out to local organizations, cold calling people and be like, what do you guys have? So I can send people to. And my mission for the summer as well is to like cold call all the local therapists and be like, please let me take you out for coffee. Not to like hammer you down for a business, but just get to know you. Just build a little community here. Even if it's scary.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. I think that's great. Because I feel like, too, I'm just remembering, like, in New York, it feels so distant. You can, in spite of like being so surrounded by so many people, you're kind of just like doing your own thing. But forming that community will also just help your business, but help you to kind of move through, have other resources for clients.
Yeah. But I also think something that I'm lacking is I don't have, now that I'm licensed, I don't have like a supervisor or like a group of other therapists that I see constantly. So that is a little isolating. So kind of just wanting that. Not necessarily to have like supervision, but just someone to bounce something off. Because I think sometimes therapy is a little bit of an isolating, like you're saying, career. You kind of see your patients and go home.
Right. Yeah. I might like Google search something if I like have a question. Like being able to talk to another clinician who kind of gets it is really helpful. Great. As we wrap up, what is some advice that you would give for fellow therapists, fellow counselors?
Yeah. So I would say if you're looking to move into business, really do research and kind of don't be afraid to seek mentorship from people who've already done it. Even outside of wanting to do business, if you want to like move up in the nonprofit world, become a director, manage a large group of people, seek mentorship from people, invite people out for coffee, for happy hour, for dinner, for brunch, take the plunge and just pick their brain about their career trajectory. And kind of start viewing yourself as more of like a pillar of your community as opposed to just an employee within your space, probably.
I love that. Because we are pillars of the community.
Literally. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrea, for coming on today. I feel like this is really helpful because I do hear a lot from people not starting their own business or like myself, like I don't have my own business yet. I'm just at someone else's practice. So it's really interesting to hear someone so successful who's doing it.
That's sweet. Thank you. Appreciate
now,
it.
for those listening, where can they like keep up with you and see what you're up to?
So my website is armentalhealthcounseling.com. Not too active on Instagram, but that's my, website for referrals and, on the last stages of hiring someone. So hopefully adding someone else to the website. And yeah, that's where they can find me.
Exciting. Okay. Well, and for those listening, like links will be down below, so you can always follow there. If you like the podcast, comment, share, follow, do all that stuff, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you.